The Manchester derby was very surprising in terms of the result. Let's break down what actually happened in the match. Manchester City's defensive line looked completely uncoordinated in defense due to injuries. Because of this, the defensive midfielder Rodri often dropped deeper to somehow help his teammates progress the ball from defense into attack. Even the simplest passes were not coming off today, as we can see in this episode, and already by the 8th minute, Manchester United had created two potential counter-attacking situations. By that point, Mbeumo was ready to immediately burst into depth and attack the space behind the defenders. If we talk about the shape and structure of Manchester City and Manchester United, first of all, United completely gave up possession. They did not try to dominate the ball and instead focused on counterattacks. As a result, Manchester City were able to progress through their own half quite easily. Their attacking structure often looked like a 3-1-6. Manchester United defended in a 4-4-2 shape. Manchester City frequently tried to overload one flank. We can see a large concentration of players here. This was done so that Dorgu could receive the ball in isolation on the opposite flank. In a mid-block, Manchester United tried to apply some pressure on City's players, making short pressing runs. A key feature of this pressing was the movement of United's wingers. They were the ones initiating it. We can see Amad Diallo here sprinting towards Ake, forcing him to play the ball backwards and switch the side. On the opposite flank, Patrick Dorgu also stepped up quite high to press. Because both the left and right wingers of Manchester United pushed up aggressively to initiate the press, unlike the first defensive line of Bruno Fernandes and Mbeumo, space appeared behind the wingers. This created zones where a pass could be played, allowing Manchester City to create a 2-versus-1 advantage. At this point, it became crucial for the holding midfielders to cover these zones in time. In this moment, we see Kobbie Mainoo shifting across to cover the flank next to a Manchester City player, but in doing so, he loses the player in central midfield he was originally marking. Manchester City then switched the play again, finding Dorgu, who consistently stayed very wide and maintained the team's width. Very often, City tried to overload the right flank with quick combinations and then switch the ball out wide to Jeremy Dorgu, who was isolated on the left. Manchester United always used cover against Dorgu. Diallo was never left alone. He always had support from Diallo. The left back and the left winger played against Dorgu together. Interestingly, Diallo positioned himself quite far away from Dalot. This meant that even if Dorgu managed to beat Dalot, there would still be another 1-versus-1 duel to win afterward. In other words, Dorgu would need to beat two players in 1-versus-1 situations before being able to cross, cut the ball back, or produce any end product. Many teams confront him immediately in a 2-versus-1 on the flank, which allows Dorgu to look for a passing option between the defenders. It is also important to note that at times Mbeumo drifted out wide and helped his teammates on the flank, creating either numerical equality or superiority, and forcing Dorgu, as in this episode, to simply play the ball backwards. If Mbeumo did not help on the flank, there was always a player assigned to mark Dorgu individually and track his movement. In this case, Dalot closes the player in the half space. If Mbeumo does not track back defensively, then Manchester City's left back Ake can comfortably step into that space and carry the ball forward. We can see how easily he progresses in this attack. Finally, there were moments of miscommunication in central midfield. We see two Manchester United holding midfielders stepping towards the same Manchester City player, which creates space between the lines in the half space. Because Dalot and Amad Diallo are always ready to cover players out wide, they take up quite wide positions to deny Ake and Dorgu those extra 1 or 2 meters on the flank. As a result, passes into the half space were possible. They were not frequent, but they did happen. And if Mbeumo once again failed to cover that zone or track back defensively, Ake could deliver the ball into the penalty area freely. Manchester United did not press aggressively and gave possession to Manchester City. While some of their attempts at high pressing ended quite poorly for United, we can see that they tried to press man-to-man in the first line of pressure. Bruno Fernandes was responsible for one center-back, Mbeumo for the other, while one of the holding midfielders stepped higher to cover the player in the defensive midfield zone. However, we see how quickly Manchester City bypassed this press with a single pass from the goalkeeper. The first line is already broken, and United have to drop back into their defensive shape. At this point, it is important to immediately highlight something mentioned earlier. Manchester United's right flank gave Dorgu very little space and did not allow Ake much freedom on the flank either. We can see how wide both Diallo and Dalot position themselves in this situation. Because of this, first of all, Casemiro is left in a 2 versus 1 situation in central midfield. Secondly, look at the passing lanes that open up. Diallo is still positioned in a way that allows him to switch across to Ake if needed, rather than closing the central passing lane to Bernardo, who is looking to receive the ball. As a result, Bernardo receives the ball comfortably, and Manchester City play their way out of Manchester United's press. Manchester United used specific rotations in this match that helped them progress from defense into attack. These rotations mainly involved the right flank and the attacking players, the center forward and the attacking midfielder. There were frequent attempts to find these players between the lines so they could receive the ball and develop the attack from there. It is important to note that Manchester United's right winger always started from a wide position and then moved inside, dragging the left back with him and thereby opening up space on the flank for the right back and in some cases for Bruno Fernandes as well. Many of these rotations and movements led to goal-scoring opportunities for Manchester United. We can see this Manchester United triangle, Bruno Fernandes, Amad Diallo, and Mbeumo, constantly rotating and swapping positions. In this moment, the right winger moves inside, ready to attack the depth. The center forward drops deeper, looking to receive between the lines. And Bruno Fernandes runs into the wide area. Crucially, Diallo pulls the player responsible for maintaining width into the center, while the midfielder fails to track Bruno Fernandes. These triangles and rotations simply tore Manchester City apart. Unfortunately for United, a number of their chances resulted in disallowed goals due to offsides. Nevertheless, this combination deserves both respect and recognition. Bruno Fernandes also frequently drifted to the right flank and tried to attack the space behind Ake. Ake struggled to control depth in this match, and Manchester United clearly tried to target his zone. As mentioned earlier, counterattacks were a key aspect of Manchester United's game. They created a lot of chances through transitions. Manchester City players often lost the ball in dangerous areas, and United could have been more clinical in finishing these counterattacks. In this episode, we see a moment where a pass could have been played wide to Mbeumo, but Diallo delays the decision. Look at how intelligently Bruno Fernandes plays here. He does not make a run in behind through the 2 narrow central corridors between the defenders, because it is very difficult for a pass to reach that area. Instead, he creates an additional passing option on the flank, where he can receive the ball facing the opponent's goal. Given his exceptional passing ability, he can lift his head and deliver a perfectly weighted ball to a teammate, which he almost does in this episode, playing a brilliant pass to the far post. Mbeumo lets the ball run, understanding that Dorgu is in a better position to shoot. He is clearly in a more advantageous position, but we see a poor first touch and a weak finish from Dorgu. Manchester United eventually score from a counterattack. We see poor execution from a set piece by Manchester City. A United player is first to the ball and clears it into the defensive midfield zone. What is interesting is that there are 3 Manchester United players in the second ball zone compared to only 2 Manchester City players. And look at their positioning. They are positioned wide and are not ready to contest the second ball. Player who took the free kick tries to immediately engage in counter-pressing and win the ball back from Mbeumo. Mbeumo cleverly knocks the ball forward and Manchester United break into a counterattack. It becomes a 3 versus 2 situation. Here I want to highlight Bryan Mbeumo's excellent movement. He shifts to the left to attack the corridor, highlighted in green, allowing Bruno Fernandes to move centrally. This gives Bruno Fernandes passing options in both directions. He can now play the ball either to Mbeumo or to Diallo because they have swapped positions. In this attack, the central area is blocked by Manchester City players, but the half-space passing lanes are open. Bruno Fernandes plays the pass into that zone to Mbeumo, who scores the goal. The second goal, meanwhile, comes from defensive mistakes inside the penalty area by Manchester City. In Manchester United's second goal, Cunha beats O'Reilly on the flank and delivers a cross. But Manchester City's positioning inside their own penalty area is extremely poor. First of all, no one is ready to provide cover for O'Reilly. Then, City's players fail to block any of the passing or cutback lanes. In my opinion, this is how Manchester City's players should be positioned in this situation. AK and Kusanov should be positioned much deeper, as they are the ones who need to block low cross or pass. The players should also be closer to the second ball zone, ready to control rebounds and second phase situations. They need to be prepared to dominate these areas. However, the main problem here is also Rico Lewis. He ball watches, completely loses sight of Dorgu, does not accelerate towards the ball, and simply allows Dorgu to run off his blind side and score. As a result, it was a deserved and convincing victory for Manchester United. Manchester City did not deserve even a single goal in this match. Interestingly, only 15% of you expected Manchester United to win this game. Leave a like, share your opinion on this Manchester derby in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for even more football tactical analysis.